herself a smile. She'd done it again. And the honest-to-goodness truth was that she loved every single second of the cattle roping and would have competed without any prize money. She knelt and jerked the rope free from the steer's horns before releasing the binding from its legs. The creature hefted itself up with a bellow. Before it raced off, she slapped its hide affectionately, letting it know of her appreciation for the fun. Coiling her rope around her arm, she cast her sights to the sun, making its way toward the western range. Looked like she'd have time for the last and best event before she needed to start home. Folks all thought Buster Bliss came up from Denver over the Kenosha Pass on the weekends to participate in the cowhand competitions. While friendly contests had always existed in some form on the local ranches, the gatherings were growing in popularity and size, so it wasn't unusual nowadays for fellows to travel from outside of the area to join in, especially as the prize money increased. Her cover worked well, given that Buster always had to depart early enough in the evenings to travel for a spell. The leaving helped her avoid questions about why she didn't want to go with everyone else to the saloons after the contests were over. It was already hard to keep her cover for the few hours she competed. She'd never be able to last well into the night. "Bliss!" At the shout of her name from Mac Custer, Elkhorn Ranch foreman, the organizer of the Sunday afternoon competition, she pivoted as casually as she could while she kept wrapping her rope. Instead of looking her way, the foreman was clasping hands in greeting with someone else. A man with a strong, lean outline and a determined set to his shoulders. For several heartbeats, Ivy could only stare, trying to make sense of the familiar form. It couldn't be. The fella shifted enough that she got a full view of his profile, a chiseled jaw covered in a layer of stubble, firm lips, and light brown hair peeking out from underneath his hat. Her pulse began to race unsteadily. She didn't have to see him head on to know he was Jericho Bliss, her girlish infatuation. As though sensing her attention, he glanced her way. She spun and faced the opposite direction. Holy St. Peter, what was Jericho Bliss doing back in South Park? She hadn't heard a peep from him since the night he'd ridden away with Dylan nearly 2 years ago. At the time, Jericho had been doing her and her brothers a big favor by helping Dylan steer clear of the danger he'd been in from Bad and his gang for the gambling debt he'd owed them. Like everyone else, she'd been grateful to Jericho for saving Dylan's life. Eventually, Dylan had written, letting them know he was fine and had steady work. He hadn't told them where he was or what he was doing, and he hadn't said anything about Jericho either. They'd guessed Dylan hadn't wanted to give too much away, in case Bad and his gang got wind of his letter and decided to come after him. Ivy had waited impatiently for another letter, for more news, for anything from Dylan. She'd told herself she was just concerned about her brother and wanted assurance he was okay. But deep down, she couldn't deny she'd wanted information about Jericho, too. For a long while, she hadn't been able to resign herself to the fact that he'd walked out of her life, that he hadn't wanted her. She'd clung to the hope that maybe, once he was gone, he'd realize how much he missed her and would return to tell her he couldn't live without her. But as the weeks had passed into months and the months into years, the hard truth had taken up residence and crowded out any hope that was left. Jericho had never cared about her and wasn't coming back.
"We got Roman-style riding next,"
Mac Custer said to Jericho.
"Saved the hardest for last. Want to join in for old time's sake?"
Jericho was silent, and she was tempted to turn around and gawk at him.
"Winner gets a whole $1.
If Jericho raced, what if he ended up beside her? She hadn't changed all that much during his absence. With her luck, he'd recognize her and blab her identity.